Good afternoon, everybody, from Amnesty, home of the Maccabees and other brave people. I'm Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land, where you get your top stories making headlines from Israel every Monday to Thursday. And just a reminder that if you want to read our written material, you can do so on our website at www.layoftheland.online. We're on Facebook. Join our community at Lottel's site. If you see our content, please consider sharing. We really want to get past those Facebook censors and caps. We are on YouTube. Our channel is the Israel Brief, and please help us spread the word from Israel by clicking on that red subscribe button so that people get the news from Israel that they may not see in that mainstream media. And of course, we're on Twitter at Lay of the Land 5. But let's take a look at those headlines, and we begin with yet another conversation between Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett yesterday and Russian President Putin. The call lasted for about an hour and a half. And while the Prime Minister's office did not release a statement afterwards, we know that the possibility of a ceasefire was discussed. After the Prime Minister spoke to Putin, he then spoke to the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and updated him about his call. And as has become the custom of President Zelensky, he took to Twitter to announce that Prime Minister Bennett had spoken to Putin. Now, people are reading a lot into President Zelensky's tweet, because if he speaks to other world leaders, he'll say, I spoke to this one or that one, and they're 100% behind Ukraine. And some people have said, why is he not using that language with Israel? And the answer is very simple. It is because Israel is in a role of mediator, and whereas other countries have not taken any such a role. And yesterday, Zelensky's chief of staff, as well as the defense minister, both lauded Israel for our mediation efforts. And the chief of staff went on to say that Israel's taken on the mantle of very, very brave mediation. So I hope that clarifies that one up. And while we are still talking about Ukraine, it has been confirmed that President Zelensky will address members of our parliament, our Knesset, via Zoom next week. Now, the Knesset is not sitting in session at the moment, but Speaker of the Knesset, Miki Levy, has said that every effort will be made to ensure that as many parliamentarians attend this Zoom as possible. We do know that the president will speak to a full house of Congress in the United States this week as well. Meanwhile, many are asking whether or not Israel is joining the rest of the world in imposing sanctions against Russia, and the answer is yes. Yesterday, our Foreign Minister Yair Lapid announced that his ministry is in consultations with all the relevant ministries to impose sanctions, and the U.S. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss reiterated that earlier today when she tweeted out that she lauds her counterpart in Israel, Lapid, for Israel's movement to join the rest of the international community. And while we're on the subject of Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, he also spoke to his Ukrainian counterpart. Now, some people in the media here were speculating that the two hadn't spoken, and perhaps this was a snub by the Ukrainian Foreign Minister because Israel hasn't taken, in their opinion, a side against Russia. But everybody in the Zelensky administration understands that Israel is mediating, albeit in a very, very delicate position. And Lapid tweeted out just moments ago that the two foreign ministers had spoken. The conversation was long and productive and put to rest those speculations. And while we're on the subject of our foreign ministry and the aid that we've been given, I just want to give you some humanitarian aid updates. It has been announced that the field hospital that is being built in Western Ukraine will be named after Israel's first female Prime Minister, Golda Meir. Golda Meir not only is an international icon and somebody who not just Israelis and Jews look up to, but she's somebody that Ukrainians look up to, because she was actually born in Kiev in Ukraine and made Aliyah on the ship the Pocahontas very early in her life, and went on to achieve her tremendous achievements, becoming foreign minister as well as the first female prime minister. Really, really iconic. And we also had news yesterday that Maccabi Tel Aviv is partnering with 2 aid agencies, and they will be giving anybody who's bound for Romania on a El Al flight a care package to give to Ukrainian refugees. Refugees are pouring into neighboring Romania, and El Al, in partnership with Maccabi Tel Aviv, Sasa Seaton, and Jewish Impact, will be giving some consumables to the refugees who have had to flee their homes. Most notably, in these humanitarian packages, which can be stowed under the seat of people who are flying, is aid and medicine for babies and children, the most vulnerable and the most affected. Now, yesterday we spoke about the fact that Amnesty International's USA Director Paul O'Brien made some really, really appalling comments over the weekend, including saying that he doesn't believe that Israel should exist as a Jewish state, and dismissing the fact that 8 out of 10 Americans are pro-Israel. He says, according to his gut, that's not what American Jews want. They just want safe spaces. Now, we would just like to remind Director O'Brien that we do have a safe space for Jews. It's called the State of Israel. But yesterday, a very, very strong statement was put out by 25 Jewish members of the House of Representatives. And amongst that, they condemned O'Brien's comments, also saying that his comments were disturbing, patronizing, deeply offensive, and it's anti-Semitic to deny the Jewish people any independent agency in determining their future. And this was backed up by many members of Congress who tweeted it out as well and reiterated their support for their Jewish counterparts. Now, if you recall, just last month, Amnesty International released their report accusing Israel of practicing apartheid, and their report was roundly dismissed by democratic countries, including the United States, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, France, and various others. But what has Mr. O'Brien had to say? Well, he tried to backtrack his comments, saying that this is not what was said. He was quoted or misquoted rather in the article. However, Gabby Deutsch, a reporter who wrote the article exposing O'Brien's comment, released transcripts of her recorded conversation, and they are pretty damning. So remember, sometimes it's not just about the article that's written, but there are always tapes to back it up. Last night, Israel's government websites crashed. None of them were available, and it is speculated that this could have been a hack from the Iranians. One area where Israel has a lot of concern right now is any opportunistic type of attack the Iranians might launch against Israeli targets. Just 2 days ago, Iran fired missiles into Erbil, into a U.S. consulate, and they said that they had struck a Zionist target. So expect to hear more tit-for-tat kind of attacks in the media soon. And our final story we all are asking here in Israel is, will we see a white Purim? What does this mean, you ask? So I will tell you. It is the middle of March, and it is usually the time of the year where spring is starting to spring. Can't say spring has sprung because it's starting to spring. The temperatures are rising, people are heading outside, and we are having some very uncharacteristically cold weather. As we speak, it's about 9 degrees here in Modi'in, very, very cold, and there have been reports of light snow in places like Jerusalem and other areas that are mountainous. So what this means is that some schools in those areas are closed. We are experiencing very cold weather, and we hope that if you are dressing up for Purim in these areas, you are considering a much warmer Purim costume. But that's it for today from me, Rolene Marks, with the Israel Brief. But don't forget to tune in tomorrow. Don't forget to check out all our social media. Like us, follow us, share us. You know what to do. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Rolene Marks. This has been the Israel Brief.